So this week, our speaker is Brenna Thompson. She's a registered and licensed dietitian with a master's degree in applied nutrition. After completing her dietetic internship at West Virginia University Hospital, she worked for Phoebe Sumter Memorial Hospital in Americus, Virginia. She moved back to Minnesota in 2012 and went on to work at 2 health and wellness clinics before joining the Stepping Stone Clinic team in 2018. Brenna is passionate about teaching people how foods interact with their body and helping patients learn how what they eat affects how they feel. In her talk today, she will be discussing memory, moods, and foods, and it's sure to be fascinating. Welcome, Brenna.
Thank you. Give myself. I feel like I'm not used to doing anything these days since we've been.
That's a tough one. You just push.
There we go.
Yeah.
It works. I'm always surprised when technology works for me. Maybe I shouldn't be that surprised. All right, so yes, memory, moods, and foods. And I'll say since we're a small group, if you have a question, you can like raise your hand or shout it out or do whatever you'd like to do. But yes, so there's a little bit about me. We lived in Albany, Georgia. Moved down there in 2009, just after my internship, and worked on my master's online. And then we moved back to, when I say we, I mean me and my husband. I met him down in Mankato, but we moved back to Minnesota in 2012. The last several years, I've been a full-time stay-at-home mom, but then I just have been able to kind of keep my little side gig, adulting, as we like to say. I work for Stepping Stone Clinic, which is actually a psychology clinic in Richfield. We are the only truly integrative psychology clinic in Minnesota where we really bring in both the psychology side with the nutrition side. We're also in the works of getting a physical therapist or an occupational therapist in our clinic. So. And then the last year and a half or so, I've also been a blog writer for City PT, which is a virtual physical therapy company out of North Carolina. Been having lots of fun. So a lot of times when I'm talking with groups, I say, what's your why? What's your why? And for me, when I ask that question, I'm like, why do you want to eat better? Why do you want to learn about nutrition? Why do you want to take care of yourself? And as I have pondered that question over the years, especially working at Stepping Stone, I really came to the fact that I have a very, very strong family history of anxiety, depression, bipolar, hoarding, alcoholism, eating disorders, and suicide. And so for me, mental health is my why. I noticed years ago that I was kind of struggling with a little bit of kind of the anxiety piece of it. After we had our first son, there was some mild postpartum depression, which really ultimately comes down to sleep and lack of it. But I said, you know what? It stops with me. The anxiety, the depression, all of this mental health stuff, it stops with me. I'm not passing it on to my children. They don't need to be affected by this. And I know from what I have been taught, what I've learned, what I've experienced myself and with my clients and my patients, is that nutrition and supplements can make a huge difference in people's life and in how they feel and how their brains work. So the purpose of today's presentation is just a quick overview of how nutrition affects your brain. What foods will support your mental health? What foods will damage your brain? At the end, if we were a little bit more of a clinically based audience here, we would also go over several medications that affect your mental health too. And before we really dive deeper, I am not here to diagnose or treat any medical conditions, but I'm happy to answer questions. And let me tell you, I had no idea that section up there, as I was talking to a few people before we got started, the wiping butts part, nobody tells you how important and how big of a piece of your brain that takes up. So we are going to jump back to your high school psychology class a little bit here. And you may have learned back in the day about your synapses, the synaptic gap, and dendrites. What we're really showing here is the connections in your brain. The nerves in your brain don't touch. There's a gap between them. We call that the synapse. And in order for our bodies and our brains to send messages back and forth and to tell us, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I like this person, I'm happy, I'm mad, why did you take that from me? For us to express all of those things, we have to get the message from this synapse or from this ganglion over to this dendrite, and we do it by sending neurotransmitters across that synapse. And these little neurotransmitters get spit out, they float across the synapse, and they have to fit into receptor sites on the other nerve. And then we send that message on down the way. You remember all of that, right?
Yes.
So we have several different nutrients that are really, really important for your brain. We have proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. The other two nutrients that aren't up here are alcohol and water. Now, water is of course important, alcohol is debatable. So protein, do you all know what a protein is? What counts as protein? I liked, for a second I thought it changed. I wonder if all right, so proteins, we're gonna back it up here. Your body is built from 9 essential amino acids that we get from our food. You have to eat these amino acids. They don't just come from thin air. So when we eat our food, it's broken down into those little amino acid components. So that hamburger that you had today, it's made up of 9 different amino acids, and you shoot it up, it's gonna go into your stomach, we're gonna digest it more, we break it down into those amino acid components. And then after we digest it some more and absorb it, those are going to get rebuilt. Those amino acids get rebuilt into your neurotransmitters. Now, if your cells are going to talk to one another, they need protein. And if you don't eat adequate protein at every meal, you can end up being anxious, depressed, hungry, and tired. Does that sound like anybody you know? I might not be. When you think about that person, you think, are they eating enough protein? So neurotransmitters are made from protein, not carbs, not fat. And if they are our chemical communicators in our brain, they allow our cells to talk to one another. So does anybody know what the neurotransmitters serotonin and dopamine are made from? What was that in the back?
I've heard about serotonin.
You've heard about serotonin, yes. So serotonin is one of the major neurotransmitters when it comes to just keeping us happy. When people are low in serotonin, they might experience more depression. And serotonin is made from tryptophan. Have you heard of tryptophan? Turkey. Yes, I like to say turkey, tuna, and bananas are good contributors for that tryptophan. Now, you don't get tired when you eat turkey because it has tryptophan in it. You get tired because you ate all the mashed potatoes and the pumpkin pie that goes with it. Tyrosine helps us make dopamine, and tyrosine also comes again from a lot of our protein foods. More protein. So, do I have anybody here who is a vegetarian or a vegan? Okay, then I won't give you my full disclaimer on this one. So, meat is the single best source of protein, fulfilling your requirements, which is a minimum of 60 to 90 grams per day for most adults. With non-meat foods requires enormous planning and effort, more than most people can manage. You have to eat 3 cups of beans. That's going to have about 100 grams of carbohydrate in it to equal the same amount of protein in 6 ounces of animal protein. And 6 ounces is probably about what that hamburger was. Now, do you want to replace that hamburger with 3 cups of black beans? How would you feel later on?
Loaded.
Loaded, yeah. So animal protein is our only source of B12, which is essential for life itself. And vegans often become deficient in B12, iron, zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, and many others. And yes, plant foods do contain many of these nutrients, but they are more bioavailable from meat. So that means that it's much easier for us to digest and absorb those nutrients when we get it from animal proteins versus when we try to do it from plant foods. So several of those nutrients that I just hit on were B12, zinc, and iron. So B12 is our helper, and it helps produce red blood cells, and it helps iron produce hemoglobin for transporting oxygen in your blood. Now, if your brain is not getting good blood flow, if it's not getting good oxygen, how do you think you're gonna feel? Lousy. Do you think you're gonna have good moods? No. Do you think you're gonna have good energy?
No.
No. Do you think you are going to have good memory? No. Right. So zinc is also really important, and studies show that it may help with hyperactivity and impulsivity in kids. It is less beneficial for some of the inattentiveness. Iron is also very necessary for helping us make our dopamine. I mean, dopamine is a neurotransmitter of seeking. Dopamine is the one that if we are low in it, we're like constantly seeking things out. And it's also the one that people associate with addiction. So it's not necessarily a neurotransmitter of liking, because you may not like the thing that you're actually addicted to or that you actually want. Or you might think, I really shouldn't have that, 5th chocolate chip cookie, but I can't stop myself. Here, it's a neurotransmitter of seeking. Now, what food happens to be high in B12, zinc, and iron? Oysters. Oysters and liver.
Oh, good.
Yes. So if you come over to my house, there's liver in our freezer and there are oysters in the pantry. Because if you've never had an oyster, let me tell you, the little ones that come smoked in a tin, ooh, those are delicious. You throw that on top of a salad or something, it's awesome. I got a few eye rolls.
I didn't even know you could get them in a tin.
You can get them in a tin at Trader Joe's. They've got them at Aldi's. You can get them at Lunds and Byerly's, Whole Foods. Yes. My 1.5-year-old, we take them out of the tin and I kind of like cut them in half, and he'll sit there and eat like a 10.5.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Don't ask me about the breed. That's a whole other story. So top 2 proteins. So when we are thinking protein, I like to think of some of these as what we call genius foods. Foods that are really going to support your brain. Yes, there are oysters and liver. But we've also got eggs. So eggs are high in choline, which is associated with reducing inflammation and promoting brain function. It helps maintain your memory and the communications between those brain cells. Salmon, I think we've all heard, like, you should eat fatty fish, you should eat more salmon. Those omega-3s that we get from our fish, as well as from oysters, are critical for brain development and function. And additionally, these fatty acids have been found to help lower the risk of heart disease, depression, and arthritis. So you're all gonna go make a salmon for Tata tonight for supper, right? Proteins to avoid. So this is not necessarily about the red meat. This is about having them be processed meats. So studies show a correlation between a high intake of processed meats and bowel cancer. We've shown that burned meats, or those charred meats, they produce something called heterocyclic amines. You don't have to remember that.
Thank you.
These are also correlated with different forms of cancer. So this is more about the cancer piece of that. So choosing more of your unprocessed meats, so things that haven't, so less of like the sausages, the hot dogs, the salamis on that side, and more of your whole cuts. Yes.
Yeah, so does this come into play with like deli turkey versus, or ham versus that's in the package?
That's a really good question, and I have not seen anything that really differentiates. But a lot of times it's talking more about like the salamis, the like sausagey kind of stuff. I have a lot of people who are like, oh, you're not supposed to eat the deli meats, it's so processed. I'm like, if you really look at it, like if you get like deli turkey breast or a deli ham or some deli roast beef, I'm like, it's a chunk of meat that you could have done at home and they just happen to slice it for you really thin. And if that's how I'm gonna get protein in you, please eat it.
I had heard, yeah, that the stuff that's packaged and ready to go, that I don't know, is actually a carcinogen of some sort, and I don't know, one of those you eat crap documentaries and nobody tells you. And it's always like that.
My big thing is, I'm like, as much as you can, let's choose the whole kind of like raw cuts first, and then if you're choosing some deli turkey, some deli ham, let's find the higher quality ones. Maybe not the like, you know, 6 ounces for $1, but maybe we can pay like $3 for our 6 or 8 ounces. Just so that we're using a slightly better quality animal, maybe some better quality ingredients as preservatives in there. So what about red meat? Because this has been a big factor of fear for people for many years now. But there have been some really interesting studies coming out. One of them is called the MIND diet, and it was based partially on the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diets kind of combined. But they incorporated foods specifically relevant to brain health. And the study followed 1,220 adults aged 60 and older for a period of 12 years. So this was a big study. And so this is one to like really watch and look at. And during this time, a dietary pattern that followed the MIND diet was linked to a 19% reduced odds of developing clinically diagnosed mild cognitive impairment, aka dementia. In contrast, no benefit was found for adhering to the Mediterranean strictly or a DASH diet strictly. But it was really kind of looking at these combined, but then also adding in some other specific nutrients from foods. Yeah.
But I heard of the Mediterranean diet. What's a DASH diet?
What is the DASH diet? The DASH diet was, oh, what does it stand for? It's dietary something. It was created to reduce blood pressure. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a great track record. There, you know, people who really try to follow it very, very strictly reduce their blood pressure by like 5, maybe 10 points. It's very, very hard to stick to. Yes.
Was this study all women, or were the results more pronounced in women?
The one for elderly women, that one was from a slightly different study. So that was from one where they had 1,000 women who participated in another study. And those results showed that women who were consuming moderate amounts of red meat experienced less muscle loss and lower rates of Alzheimer's. So
We don't know the answer from that.
what was your question?
We don't know the answer from that.
No, that study wasn't on men. No, that was just women. And that one was out of, what's really interesting is I have found as I've been, you know, the last 15 years of reading research, is Australia is really progressive with some of their research. They do some really interesting studies in Australia. And that one in particular that came out was a big one. Because again, it's like we keep telling people like, don't eat red meat, it's bad for cancer, it's bad for your heart, it's bad for your brain, blah, blah, blah. And here they were like, no, 3 to 4 servings a week. I mean, and I'm having patients oftentimes come into me and they're like, we're trying not to eat any red meat. And I'm like, no, I want you to go back home and I want you to start adding it in, especially if you can get good quality beef. So top 3 fats. So maybe you've heard that fats are good. I'm a big fan of not necessarily eating like really high fat diets, but having them at all of your meals because they really do help keep your blood sugars more balanced. They help you feel full and satisfied so that we're not wanting to keep snacking on everything. And our top 3 brain supporting fats are almonds, but I kind of say all nuts are very good for our brains, avocados, and extra virgin olive oil. Some other fats to include in your diet include things like butter or ghee, the dairy fats of sour cream, heavy cream, cream cheese, raw or dry roasted nuts, nut butters. So those would be like your peanut butter, almond butter, sunflower seed butter, coconut. That one was kind of deemed not good for many, many years, but for some people, these high, like you'll see the keto diet, you'll see people who are eating a lot of fat and a lot of saturated fat. Some people do great on that diet. Some people, because of their genetics, do not. It's kind of learning what works for you. Back old school would be lard, tallow, and schmaltz. Anybody remember what those are?
Yeah.
What is schmaltz? That's chicken fat.
Oh,
So if people grew up in a Jewish family, they might know a little bit more about schmaltz than the rest of us. Yes. Yes, and bacon. I count bacon as a fat, not as a protein, because I'm like, you pull that slice out, and you're like, no, that's fat.
So is that just beef fat or pork
Yep.
bacon or turkey or is it all?
So turkey bacon is going to lean more heavily on the protein side. But if you look at like pork bacon, it's I'm like, that's mostly fat. It's delicious. It's mostly fat. Fats to avoid. So go home tonight, write this list down or take a picture, whatever you need to do. Look at anything in your pantry or your refrigerator that has these fats listed in there and throw it out. Or gradually get rid of them. So all of these fats. So when we think about the cells in your body, you have a ring of fat around every cell in your body. And that ring of fat needs to be very healthy in order to protect your DNA and all of the organelles that are inside of that cell. When we eat those other fats, the ones listed here, these fats help keep that ring of fat really strong and stable and sturdy. They help keep those receptor sites in your brain working properly. If we are eating mostly these fats crack open that cell. They make it really hard for those neurotransmitters to get into their receptor sites. It's like they almost like create a coating over that, like a wax coating, and things can't get in that need to, and things can't get out that need to. So top carbohydrates. When I say carbohydrates, what do you think of? Sugar. Anything else? Bread. Noodles, pasta, crackers, cereal. All those things. Did you ever think of blueberries or greens?
Blueberries, yes, but not greens.
But not greens, yes. So foods that we eat have to be a protein, a fat, or a carbohydrate. Have to. That's what they are. So yes, all of your fruits, your vegetables, your grains, your beans, your legumes, they are all carbohydrates. They don't get like some weird pass in some other group. And so the carbohydrates that are best for your brain are going to be those really, really deep antioxidant rich blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, but then the really dark green leafy veggies.
So what's the difference between organic and non-organic blueberries?
The taste, the
No,
price.
the value of them when you eat them.
I try to go by the clean 15 and the dirty dozen. And what that means is that the dirty dozen are fruits and veggies that are the most heavily sprayed with non-organic herbicides and pesticides. And I don't go through and like scrub every little blueberry. And we know that your berries tend to carry more of those herbicides and pesticides. So I do try to buy my berries organic. Something like a banana, because it's got a peel on it, I can peel that outside off. So if I can't find organic bananas or they're all like 100% green or 100% brown, I'll buy conventional. That's the difference. Something like spinach, again, I don't go through and like wash every leaf, so I tend to buy my greens organic. Other carbohydrates to include all of your fruits and your berries, especially if they're not packed in syrup or coated in sugar, all of your vegetables, even the canned ones. Because I hear people are like, well, they don't eat vegetables because they're like, well, I've heard that the frozen's not as good, or I heard the cann's not as good. And I'm like, which do you like? Which will you keep around? You know, people tell me I don't buy vegetables because they go bad. No, like you can buy frozen veggies, you can buy canned veggies. They are still better than no veggies. Your beans, your legumes, For some people, whole grains are a good choice. For other people, they aren't. Carbs to avoid. I like to call this garbage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do I have any of your favorites up here?
Yes.
Yes. So these carbs and sugary treats are going to increase your blood sugar too high and too fast for most people. And this causes your blood vessels to constrict and decrease blood flow to every tissue and every organ in your body, including your brain. Isn't that interesting?
What about diet soda? Is that so bad too?
Oh, we're gonna get there.
Okay.
Look at that.
Probably have been.
It's like she read my mind.
Oh, wow, big heading even.
So one of the most commonly used artificial sweeteners in diet sodas is aspartame. Have you heard of this one? Yes. Right. It is particularly damaging to the brain. Consider how it impacts something called aspartate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter associated with memory as well as learning and pain perception. So aspartame stimulates that neurotransmitter. And that might sound like a good thing, but in excessive amounts and over time, it is going to make your brain become less receptive or less, it doesn't like get excited by that as much anymore. And over time, it actually damages the neurons in your brain, causing cell death, and is associated with a host of issues, including memory problems and dementia. So I find it interesting that everybody likes to go after diet soda because they're like, oh, it's not, it could cause cancer, or it, like might cause obesity, but I'm like, it's making you lose your mind. So you pick what is your reason for giving up soda.
What is too much?
What is too much? What is too much for you? How much are you drinking right now?
I don't know, if I have a can of Diet Coke a day,
Okay.
that
How much do you love your brain?
She's nasty.
okay. So any amount pretty much is
It's
considered.
one of those where I go, okay, so if I know that, I can't unknow it. And what do I want to do about it? Now, have you ever tried stevia?
Yeah.
Stevia.
What?
It doesn't do well in your gut.
Stevia?
Yeah.
Oh, not for you? Oh, see, for me, there's this lovely little soda. It's called stevia, and it is sweetened with stevia. And I've been totally fine with it. I don't find that the stevia that's in it causes any issues. But this is where individuality comes in. And for some people, they don't. But you can get that in Firebees. And Whole Foods and Amazon. So, based on the information that you've now just learned, what habits in your eating do you want to change? What habits do you want to keep? And why do you want to make those changes? No.
What if it's expensive wine?
What if it's expensive wine?
Expensive pop?
Organic.
Yeah.
If it's from the grape, that's one thing, but you know how many wines actually have what is called, I think it's called mega purple or something added to them? Because we as Americans like our red wine to look extra red, so they add food coloring to it.
So you're saying red wine can be okay?
Red wine can be okay. It's one of those where I go, what's your goal? What's your goal? If somebody is coming to me and they might be a little bit older, they're just like, I just want to live my life and enjoy it, and I'm perfectly happy with most everything in it. I'm like, great, enjoy your nightly cocktail or your glass of wine. If I have a woman who is middle-aged, starting perimenopause, can't sleep at night, can't lose weight, and is stressed out, and is having a nightly glass of wine or two, like, because that wine before bed is going to disrupt your sleep. Wine, because it's alcohol, has to be metabolized way before anything else you ate, which means that you're not going to lose weight. And when you have that wine before bed, it's going to give you a little blood sugar up, and then it's going to have you come crashing down. So we've now disrupted your sleep, and it's going to give you hot flashes. Do you still want to drink your wine before bed? And most women can look at me and go, maybe, maybe not.
How about coffee?
Well, how much do you want to drink? Okay, I'm good with that. Don't do what my dad does, where he literally only drinks coffee. Like, that's all the man drinks. Yeah. Yes.
How long does it take to metabolize wine?
It takes approximately 1 hour per alcoholic beverage. So to metabolize it. So if you're having a 5-ounce glass of wine, it takes about an hour for your body to metabolize that. If you're having a cocktail that has like 3 shots of alcohol in it, it's going to take 2 to 3 hours for your body to fully work through that. So blood sugar in your brain. Now, I remember several years ago going out to eat for brunch. I hate brunch because I am an early riser. And so if you're making me wait until 11 o'clock to eat, no. But I waited and I waited. We got to the restaurant and they had like some kind of like salad or something, and it had a bacon steak on it. And I was like, what is a bacon steak? I must have this. And so I'm expecting to get like some bacon. And what came out was this lovely little salad with like 1 piece of thick cut bacon. By the time I got home, I could feel that my blood sugars were just tanking. I was having road rage. I like walked into the house and I think made a beeline for the refrigerator, and my husband was trying to talk to me and I was like, don't talk to me. And I had to go eat some more meat because again, it was the blood sugar roller coaster. I waited too long to eat. What I did eat wasn't enough. And so I never fully kind of got things nice and even out. So if you want to get real nitpicky here are your normal versus optimal glucose. So people like to talk about what's normal. Like we have normal blood sugar ranges, we have normal lab ranges. I don't want to be normal, I want to be optimal. So blood sugar is something I've become very, very passionate about over the years. And this past year, I did a subscription with a company called Neurotransmitters, and I got the really fun continuous glucose monitors that you like stick on the back of your arm that checks your blood sugar every 15 minutes. And I found out that me and oatmeal really don't get along well. So people think that oatmeal is this wonderful breakfast. What I found for me was that it gave me this nice little spike up to that yellow dot there. And then I just kind of stayed high for a long time until I finally crashed down about 7 hours later.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you eat anything in between?
I did not. Nope. No.
Is it a big bowl?
It was a normal, it was the like, I didn't go out there and like make my food. No, I was like, no, there's like 1/4 cup of oats and like, 3/4 cup of water, and I threw in some sunflower seed butter and some pecans, so I had some fat and some protein in there. Did not do well with that.
Why did it do that?
Because my blood sugars just don't like it.
Wow.
So normal fasting glucose levels, so that's where you wake up in the morning and you haven't eaten anything for at least 8 hours. I try to push it to really closer to about 12 hours is when we really see the true fasting window. Glucose levels between 70 to 120 milligrams. We want to see that at 80 to 86. Now, not everybody wants to stick a continuous glucose monitor on them, and not everybody wants to get their fingers pricked all the time, but you can, it can be a fun experiment because you can really see how foods start to affect you. And then I've got some other glucose ranges on there. Anybody in here like Laura bars? Yeah, get a little, all right. So you can see there, my blood sugars went from 81 up to 140 very, very quickly. And you're kind of like, oh, what does that mean? That's not what we want to see with us, especially with a snack. And then we want to see you come back down to baseline within about an hour to 2 hours. And so me and that Laura bar did not get along really well at all. And I'm just going to kind of, I know we have to start wrapping things up, so I'm going to kind of move through this little spot here. But fasting glucose level should be about 72 to 85. So if you go to your doctor and you get your blood sugar done, and they're like, oh, it was 101, you're fine. Or they say like, oh, it was like 110, you should watch what you eat. Watch what I eat, what do I do? Okay, we really, really need to start tightening up these ranges, because when our blood sugars are high, it increases your risk for cardiovascular disease, it increases your risk for dementia, it increases your risk for kidney disease, pretty much everything. High blood sugars increase aging. Blood sugar and depression. So there are some smaller studies out there looking at blood sugar and mental health. And what they found was like 19 adults who were not depressed, 8 with type 1 diabetes, and 11 healthy controls. Subjects underwent brain imaging when their blood sugar was normal. And after a continuous infusion of glucose with, which moderately elevated their blood sugars. And he said moderately elevated, and I was like, 180 to 200, that's high, that's not moderate. But what we really see is, because for a long time they were thinking like people with diabetes have increased rates of depression because of like all the medications that they have to do, all the worry that they have. But what they really found through some studies is showing that it's like the long-term impact of having those higher blood sugars and having them unregulated starting to take effect on their mental health, and their brains just not working as well as they should. So different ways of how high blood sugars or high hyperglycemia triggers depression. Can do it through insulin resistance in the brain. That means that we can't get sugar into our brain cells as easily as we used to. Decrease in brain cell growth, so our brains aren't regenerating like they used to. The cells that do grow are not wiring correctly. Having high blood sugar also stimulates chronic stress hormones, which take their toll on the brain, and it increases inflammation. So if you think of inflammation, what do you think of? What was that? Swelling, yes. Ooh, you had your hip done?
Yes,
Yes.
I did.
Did you have some swelling?
Yes.
Yes, that's inflammation. That's acute inflammation. That is your body going in there and trying to repair the tissues that got cut open and things that got reattached. You might see somebody sprain their ankle, get a black eye. Again, that puffiness is acute inflammation. When we have chronic inflammation from high blood sugars, poor diets, those crummy fats that we talked about, that kind of inflammation, it's this little like underlying swelling that's going on, and it can happen in your brain. And that just chronic inflammation, instead of things repairing themselves, they start to break down. So even mildly elevated blood sugar levels and prediabetes are significant problems and are associated with brain atrophy, memory problems, and dementia. So this is why for many people, I do recommend a low carb, for some people, a ketogenic diet, because it helps lower inflammation, it stimulates brain growth, and it improves energy and better moods for many people. Now there are medications, PPIs, that stands for proton pump inhibitor, also known as Nexium and Prilosec. Those will decrease your ability to absorb and utilize B12, other B vitamins, magnesium, calcium, iron, and zinc, all of which we have talked about, and all of which are really important for your brain. Other ones that might be kind of interest in here are those beta blockers and statins for blood pressure and cholesterol, and those reduce your body's ability to absorb and use CoQ10, which is important for your brain health as well as your heart health. So where's the beef? I think we found it today. Do you guys remember this? Yes. So good sources of B12 include, because people, people will say, well, I don't like beef. And I'm like, well, look, you can eat clams, you can eat salmon, you can eat trout. Milk has a little bit, but it's not great. Then people will tell me, oh, I eat an egg for breakfast, I'm getting my protein. And I'm like, my cat can eat 2 eggs for breakfast, so can you. The 1.5-year-old the other day took down 2.5 eggs and a bowl of cereal. Magnesium is another really important nutrient for mental health. When we are low in magnesium, we might experience symptoms like anxiety, ADHD, restless leg, and cravings. Insomnia is another big one. Good food sources are those leafy green vegetables, beef, salmon, almonds, black beans, avocado, and chocolate, which basically sounds like a really big taco salad. with a nice piece of dark chocolate on the side afterwards. If you want to supplement with magnesium, and it's probably the #1 supplement that I ever recommend to my patients, I highly recommend about 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate at bedtime, because it helps your body calm down and relax, and it puts you to sleep faster and into a deeper sleep, and it can help with restless legs. So if you're kind of like, what do I eat? I've given you 2 full menus here. So one is like a good, 2 to 3 eggs, some avocados, sauteed spinach, and mushrooms for breakfast. And then you could do, we'd like to call them really big salads for lunch with some leftovers. Supper might be some salmon or chicken, roasted veggies, and you could cook that in lard or butter or olive oil. Brain building menu #2. So this one, cottage cheese, as we're getting closer to summer, maybe someday. Doing some yogurt with some cottage cheese with berries and nuts, stir fries, roasted chicken, and then if you need snacks, some raw veggies and hummus or guac. Lots of resources. If you want more, you can look at the Stepping Stone Clinic, mn.com is the website. There's my email. We currently offer nutrition counseling, food and nutrient and toxin testing, as well as genetic testing. We started offering that last one this past year, and that has been phenomenal in helping a couple of our patients just really look at what their genes are, and then we can kind of tailor, we can get really specific with some recommendations for diet specifically for them, and then looking at like, oh, well, no wonder adding like tryptophan didn't help your sleep, like your receptors work this way versus let's try GABA and now it works better. So fun stuff there. So thank you for having me today.